I think the question is agreed by a majority of the members present. I declare the motion passed. Inland Revenue Amendment Number 5 Bill 2018. This Council resumes the second reading debate on the Ferry Services Amendment Bill 2018. The Honourable Frankie Yik, Chairman of the Bills Committee on the bill, will first address the Council on the committee's report. Honourable Frankie Yik. Madam Deputy, in my capacity as the Chairman of the Bills Committee on the Ferry Services Amendment Bill 2018, I report to Council and also the deliberations of the Bills Committee. Under the Ferry Services Ordinance currently, the maximum period of a license, whether newly granted or extended, is 3 years on each occasion, whilst the aggregate license period, including all extended periods, shall not exceed 10 years. Such requirement does not only create administrative burden on ferry operators, but is also not conducive to ferry operators' long-term planning and investment for their ferry services. The bill amends the Ferry Services Ordinance to lengthen the period for which a license to operate a ferry service may be granted or extended from 3 years to 5 years, with the existing cap of a 10-year aggregate license period unchanged. The Bills Committee held one meeting to discuss the bill. Members support the bill to encourage ferry operators to make longer-term planning and investment so that there will be improvement to service quality. In the course of deliberation, some members suggested that the administration should consider further relaxing the cap on each license period and/or the cap on the aggregate license period. The administration advised that the proposals in the bill are generally supported by the trade. A license period of an excessive length may make it difficult for an operator to project its financial situation accurately, which may in turn affect service sustainability. In particular, the business environment of the ferry trade is subject to certain changing factors, such as fluctuations in fuel cost in the global market, tight manpower situation, and evolving green technologies. The administration is of the view that maintaining the cap on the aggregate license period of 10 years will help maintain a competitive environment among ferry operators, where the Transport Department will select the most suitable operator for individual ferry routes by inviting expressions of interest or open tenders in an interval of 10 years at the maximum. A member considers that the administration should put in place a mechanism to review the effectiveness of the bill and impose conditions in the tendering exercise of the licensed ferry routes upon the commencement of the bill. Some members urge the administration to expand the coverage of special helping measures to include other ferry routes apart from the 6 major outlying island ferry routes, especially those routes serving Marwan and Discovery Bay, with a view to maintaining the financial viability of the ferry services concerned and alleviating the burden of fare increases. A member suggested that the administration should consider procuring vessels so that for running outlying ferry routes, so that even if commercially unviable, there will be emergency ferry services, including in the case of traffic congestion on Chiang Mai Bridge. The administration advised that it is the government's established policy that public transport should be run with prudent commercial principles by the private sector to enhance efficiency and cost effectiveness. The SHM are provided to the 6 major outlying island ferry routes because there is basically no alternative to the ferry services available as a means of public transport. And short of the SHM, ferry services cannot be maintained without periodic, hefty fare increases. In the midterm review to be conducted on the 6 major outlying island ferry routes, the administration will take the opportunity to review and enhance the financial viability and quality of other outlying island ferry services. And the administration plans to report the result of the review to the panel on transport in the first half of 2019. Some members expressed concern about pier facilities and urged the administration to require ferry operators to enhance the facilities at ferry piers using the opportunity of review of license periods. The administration has advised that it's willing to consider reviewing such facilities. However, such enhancements will be subject to many different factors. In the course of deliberation, the Bills Committee notes that the ordinance does not specify the license period for which a ferry operator may apply. The procedures have all along been dealt with administratively. Ferry operators can consider whether to apply for a license of maximum duration under the bill for the commissioner to grant or extend. The administration's policy is to maintain the practice described above, so it takes the view that no extra provision is required for the bill. The administration will actively inform the trade of the new arrangements upon the passage of the bill. Ferry operators will be free to consider whether or not to apply for a license of a maximum duration that the commissioner may grant or extend. For applications submitted prior to the commencement of the enacted ordinance, applicants may consider whether to keep the original license periods they applied for or to revise their applications to apply for a license of a longer period. The deliberations of the Bills Committee are in the report. The Bills Committee will not propose any CSA to the bill, and we support the resumption of second reading of the bill. Madam Deputy, I will now speak on the views of the Liberal Party on the bill. Before I start, I need to declare that I'm a director of the Hong Kong Star Ferry Services. The Hong Kong Star Ferry Services is the only ferry company operating with a franchise, and it has nothing to do with this particular bill. However, since the bill will have impact on manpower and also overall ferry operation, I'm making this declaration. The Liberal Party has been asking the administration to provide for longer license periods for ferry operation so that ferry operators will be willing to make longer investment. It is proposed that the license period will be lengthened from 3 years to 5 years instead of 10 years as proposed by the LP. Still, it is a step forward. If it is too short a license period, ferry operators will be disturbed because they have to apply for licenses very frequently, and it adds to their operating cost. And also, too short a license period will bring about uncertainties, and they will not be able to make longer-term planning and investment. Within a cap of 10 years, for every 3 years, the license has to be renewed, and then they will have to apply for 3 licenses in 10 years, and then in the last year, they also have to make an application. So it is quite disturbing. But after the amendment, within a cap of 10 years, the operators will just have to apply for 1 renewal. It will help to bring down operating cost, and ferry operators can make longer-term planning and investment. The administration encourages non-fair income in order to cross-subsidize operation, but then the license period has been too short, and subletting pier facilities also needs the approval of departments, sometimes also the approval of the town planning board. And after all the application procedures are completed, the subletting period would be very short, and therefore tenants will not want to move into piers. And after the license period is lengthened, there will be better tenancy arrangements, and then there will be more non-fare box revenue so as to lessen the pressure on fare increases, and the public will stand to gain because fares will remain stable. The administration proposes to lengthen the license period from 3 years to 5 years. The Liberal Party supports it, and I reiterate that in terms of the operating environment of ferries, the license period after having been mentioned will only solve part of the problem. With a better railway network and also road network, the patronage of ferries is on the decrease. In the past 5 years, it has come down by 5.5%, and the income has become less. However, ferry operators face rising costs, whether it is maintenance and repair, wages, and also fuel cost. All those have been going up. That is why ferry operators are operating at a loss. The patronage is going down, but ferries still take up about 1.1% of public transport services. Therefore, ferries should continue to exist. Last month, in the middle of last month, there was a signaling problem with all 4 routes along the MTR network, and ferries had a role to play in helping people cross the harbor, so it is essential. If you also regard that ferries are an important segment in public transport, you should continue to roll out measures to promote the sustainability of ferry service in Hong Kong. Back in 2011, you started to provide special helping measures to 6 major outlying island ferry routes so that with such subsidy, you can bring down the operating cost of these outlying island routes. Because of this, there is also very strict profit control on these routes. I think that is only right. However, the present monitoring mechanism cannot be supported. I think it is unfair. At present, what is done is that within the 3-year license period, there is a midterm review. In other words, just 1.5 years into the license period, if the operators have already brought in profits already expected or approved within the period, however, say for example, this may be brought about by lowering fuel cost, then in the remaining license period, the operators will have to provide concessions until the extra profit is depleted. However, if the fuel cost should go up in the interim, or if wages should experience a hike so that there will be deficits, then the operators will have to shoulder the deficit themselves. This is not a fair arrangement for operators. I therefore propose that you should revise the present monitoring mechanism, that the extra profit found in the midterm review should be deposited into a separate savings account for offsetting the fare increase pressure resulting from rise in costs in the remaining license period. I think that is a fairer way to do it, both for operators and the public. You are studying into extending the special helping measures to other ferry routes. The Liberal Party supports that. At present, for the 6 major outlying island ferry routes, there are the special helping measures including a reimbursable cost. Say, for example, you will give back the annual examination cost of vessels and also pier cleansing costs and also license fees for vessels and also concessions given to elderly people and children, etc. But these measures will not incentivize ferry operators to provide better service and enhance the quality of service. Therefore, I think you should try to make use of these special helping measures to see how they can be used to encourage operators to enhance the service quality in terms of environment protection. Apart from the 6 major outlying island routes, there are still 13 scheduled passenger carrying routes and also 67 ferry services or kai tolls serving remote areas. These routes also require licenses to operate. They are also needed by the public. But you do not provide any helping measures to them. Some small operators told me that their routes do not have any dedicated piers. They have to use public piers together with other ferries or vessels. But since at public piers there are no ticket selling kiosks and then there is no signage telling the public where to go, therefore some people just do not know there are these services, and so their operation is made difficult. Moreover, we have the $2 public transport fare subsidy scheme for elderly people and eligible disabled people, and also the non-means tested public transport fare subsidy scheme. These do not include kai tolls. In the 2017 policy address, it is said that because of the aging of piers and there will be some pier improvement schemes. However, they have not been kickstarted even now. In fact, many piers on outlying islands have been quite dilapidated, and there is a risk caused to pier users. I hope the scheme can be kickstarted soon and hope that the special helping measures can be extended to smaller ferry operators and kai tolls. Madam Deputy, the biggest problem for the ferry trade is the aging of the manpower situation and also succession problem. Our unemployment rate has stood at below 3% for a long time, and basically we have full employment. Many sectors are facing a shortage of manpower situation, and I think the situation is worst for the ferry trade. Some operators told me that they are short of 20% manpower on a long-term basis, and also maritime operations have been made to be safer in recent years, and it requires a higher manpower contingent. Therefore, the shortage problem has become worse. According to operators, maritime operators are now at an average age of 65. There are captains and also first officers who are over the year of 70 and they are still working. Once these people retire and there is no new blood coming in, even if you extend the license period for ferry operation, ferry operators will not have any manpower to help operate the trade. And for outlying island residents, this will be a very grave prospect. In April 2014, you started the training fund for maritime and air traffic talents. If people apply to become captains and officers of ferry operation, there will be subsidies for the training and we support it. However, a few years have passed by. The effect is not very outstanding. It is because Hong Kong people don't really love to work at sea. They think there is no promotion prospect and the salaries are not attractive. Therefore, the Liberal Party proposes that you should do more and further relax the application criteria so that more working people can benefit from this training subsidy fund so that they can get higher qualification to add to the fleet of people working in the trade, and also then they can have more promotion prospects. In order to tackle this shortage of manpower for the ferry trade, I discussed with the trade whether we can have qualifications framework and also experience recognition for their staff. I understand that the relevant proposal is being followed up by relevant departments. But then with regard to captains and also engineers on vessels, I hope you can consider a short-term proposal by the trade. As you know, training of a captain will require at least 5 to 6 years. In order to tackle our short-term shortage problem, you should consider import of labor appropriately. And also you should allow those working in FSD, Customs and Excise, and Marine Police, if there are captains and engineers who are retired from these departments, you should allow them to continue to work with a particular license. And I hope you can also allow river trade operators to also supply manpower if their manpower has retired from river trade. And also you should come up with a long-term objective to train up people for the maritime trade so that we can have sustainable development of the ferry trade in Hong Kong. So I speak in support of the Ferry Services Amendment Bill 2018.
Dr. Priscilla Leung, Madam Deputy, I speak in support of the Ferry Services Amendment Bill 2018. Well, the bill seeks to implement a very simple revision, and this is about the extension of the period for a license to be granted and extended from 3 years to 5 years. And the aggregate license period will remain at 10 years. Instead of taking out more than one renewal, there will be one renewal only within a 10-year period. This will cut down on the administrative costs, and there will be more time to recoup the investment. So the ferry companies will be encouraged to engage in longer-term planning and investment. Say, for example, just now, Mr. Frankie Yik has given a very detailed account. Ferry companies will be more encouraged to buy new vessels and to refurbish the existing fleet and enhance the quality of the manpower. I would like to speak on 2 points. First of all, I'd like to talk about the ferry service as part of our collective memory. Ferries always appear on the postcards of Hong Kong. We don't have just 1 or 2 ferry service routes. Outlying islands, East Kowloon, Hong Kong Island, the Central, etc. We have all got ferry services. I used to take a ferry service from Kowloon to go to the Hong Kong Island, and then I went to McDonald Road to go to school, and I spent 2 hours on the ferry to read books. So when it comes to planning, I hope that ferry services will not be phased out just because of the lack of sustainability. I want to keep this part of our history. And I'm now a member for the Whampoa East constituency. I'm also the electoral representative for Kowloon West since 2011. I understand that many popular ferry services have been sort of suspended. When Mr. Frankie Yik was yet to become a electoral member, I used to visit him at his office. He worked at a ferry company. We tried to find ways to see how the central Hong Kong ferry service and the Hong Kong Wan Chai service could be kept. I'm trying to give you the facts. I would like to tell you what happened in the past. At that time, the ferry company would like to increase the fares while citizens thought that that shouldn't be done. Very easily, we were able to gather 20,000 signatures from the community. We did some calculations, but of course the ferry operators were clearer about the cost involved. And at that time, we thought that the loss would at most be $2 million. Well, of course, for an operator, any loss would not be welcome. At the level of the LegCo and at the level of the district council, we were able to get the consensus among the Democrats as well as the pro-establishment camp. And you can tell from the minutes of the Kowloon City District Council as well as the Hansard of the LegCo. We urge the Transport and Housing Bureau not to regard ferry service as transport service, and we were begging for the tendering to be reopened. The government wasn't willing to embark on re-tendering. We were disappointed. We found it resentful. And then in 2011, come the 1st of April, ferry service was supposed to be terminated. On the evening of the 31st of March, a few thousand people gathered at the pier. Mr. Patrick Lau, representing the surveyors, and Mr. Paul Che were there together with me. We spent 2 hours there that evening, and we tried to persuade the authority that the ferry service should not be suspended. We should make good use of the pier facility there. We need to be flexible. Say, for example, we should think in terms of the policies involved so as to enable the ferry operators to have non-fare box revenue. But unfortunately, the bureaus were not willing to help. The Development Bureau was willing to help, and the Tourism Commission was eager to help. But then we were able to get our way. We did take up the matter with the Transport Bureau, but then we didn't get anything out of it. So the ferry service was suspended, or has been suspended for quite a period of time. And then before long, the promenade was open to public use. Of course, we still have the odor problem, but the waterfront has become a popular place for the public to spend their leisure time. Now the pier is still there. It seems that it has been abandoned. Ms. Christine Low, the Undersecretary for the Environment, went there, and the CE also went there, and they found that it was a waste of public resources. And it was found that it was within a private land lease. It was used as a storage for a few years. Therefore, as far as ferry service is concerned, I really hope that the government won't take it as a transport issue only. Now, Madam Deputy, for 7 long years, the government wasn't willing to reopen the tendering exercise. I've already included this point in my speech on the policy address debate. Now, for the policy address, it mentions that Hong Kong Central ferry service can be revived. So what's been mentioned is that we would like to add vitality to the pier and would like to provide a commercial element there. Professor Zhang has also made certain recommendations. Perhaps the ferry service can meet both the local demand as well as our tourism needs arising from the Kai Tak cruise terminal, because it takes a long walking distance before you can board a taxi, and then for an overseas visitor it takes a long journey to go to Hong Kong, to go to Tsim Sha Tsui, and not to mention the traffic congestion before he can take a view of the spectacular Victoria Harbour. So I think it's much better if we can provide a water taxi service, or we can provide ferry service to take passengers or visitors from the cruise terminal to Kowloon West, Tsim Sha Tsui, or Tai Kok Tsui. For Kowloon East, well, I think we can make good use of the ferries available during the non-peak hours. I'm sure the ferries can be deployed to go to the cruise terminal, and then the visitors can be taken to Hong Kong, Tsim Sha Tsui, the Central, or Kowloon East, because we're energizing East Kowloon, so we should maximize the ferries. The case is true for Hong Kong Island as well, because we have a number of initiatives for the waterfront. And I think we need the Development Bureau to be in attendance in addition to the Transport and Housing Bureau here. And for the planning side, I think the planning department should take this into account when it comes to long-term planning. I hope that with the passage of this bill, and in light of the proposal in the policy address, and I believe that the first ferry route to benefit from this bill passage would be the Hong Kong Central ferry service. This is going to be a Christmas gift for the citizens there. I hope the pier will no longer remain as an eyesore with a lot of environmental hygiene problems. In fact, residents have been complaining whether it will become the breeding ground for rodents and mosquitoes. So perhaps we can put our heads together to develop a plan so that we can have kiosks and local artists working from the pier, just like the case of the Gold Coast, where stores were set up along the waterfront for the artists, and it will attract a lot of tourists. So I did advise the government to do the following in the past. That is, we shouldn't just talk about revitalizing the waterfront. We should also rejuvenate the government departments so that they will be more flexible in their sort of operation. We should break up the bureaucracy, and we should think out of the box, and we should transcend the delineation of powers and functions between the departments. In the past, we had the CS, Mr. Henry Tang as the CS4A, and then we had Carrie Lam as the CS4A. Now we have Matthew Cheung as the CS4A. I think it is important for the CS4A to head a interdepartmental working group to put our vision into reality. It isn't just for Kowloon West, but for Kowloon Peninsula as a whole, Hong Kong Island and outlying islands. I think we should make good use of our piers as well as our ferry services. So I speak.
Mr. Ben Chan. Mr. Deputy, some people say ferries are a sunset transport mode. Well, yes, indeed. We have a transport policy where we have the railway as our backbone. But then ferries are expensive to operate. We do not have enough manpower, fuel cost is high, and maintenance is also important. This time around, the amendment is to extend the license period from 3 to 5 years in response to our aspirations for a number of years. So I support it. Very often, there is only one company bidding in tender procedures. Why? It is because not many people want to operate ferries in Hong Kong. Basically, there is always the same company coming back for the tenders. Why is that so? It is because the license is only for 3 years, and you need to renew it every 3 years, even if the aggregate period is 10 years. It is not conducive to planning for any company. So the amendment is necessary. And at the same time, kaitos serving remote areas are such that you have to beg for somebody to come forward to operate the kaitos. So residents are not guaranteed a particular mode of transport which they need. In 2008 to 2016, if you look at Star Ferry, you may see that they have a lot of passengers, but then they only made a profit of $4 million. It's such a big company. It is a landmark for Hong Kong, but every year it only makes $4 million profit. They, of course, also receive rent and they have advertising costs. If not, I don't think they can sustain until this moment. So you can see how difficult it is for ferry operators. Remember, the Cap Shui Mun Bridge was hit by a barge and the entire Lantau Island was paralyzed. And ferries provided the lifeline in a way because it was the only mode of transport, and people were asked to take ferries to go to Discovery Bay and then take buses to the airport or Tung Chung. And then only at that time we knew the importance of having a choice. But all these years you haven't been helping ferries to develop. Before the maintenance subsidy, you just allowed them to fend for themselves. After the implementation of the maintenance subsidy, the operating pressure has been lessened. But with regard to Discovery Bay and Park Island, the risk is still there for residents because there is the pressure of fare increase, and confrontation has resulted. An internal attrition has also resulted. This is a kind of social cost. As you know, when you developed these areas, you signed contracts with the developers, but residents are the victims. They move in, they hope to have a better environment, and they want to have ferries to use. But contractual clauses have victimized the residents. They are caught up in the strife. In fact, residents are not very interested in how you manage the ferry operators and the developers. They just know that if you give subsidies but they do not benefit, then they would think that it is not fair because they are also taxpayers. However, the subsidy for maintenance does not benefit them. So the DAB is asking the administration to extend maintenance subsidies to routes serving Park Island and Discovery Bay so the entire ferry trade can go on. When you do this, you should not just say that the license period will be lengthened to 5 years. In fact, there is a lot more you should do. On the other hand, operating difficulties also result from fuel cost fluctuations. In the past few years, fuel costs were like a roller coaster. It has brought a lot of impact on Hong Kong ferries because our ferries have been used for 30, 40 years. They are extremely aged and they use a lot of fuel. And there is environment pollution as a result. According to the EPD, Hong Kong's air pollution is mainly due to maritime trade, including ferries, especially for the urban area. The DAB would like to make two proposals in this regard. The administration launched a scheme to improve airside quality, and that is to help old diesel vehicles to convert into newer Euro models. It has been very successful, and you can see fewer and fewer smoky vehicles on our roads. The vehicle fleet has become younger as a result, and so airside air quality has improved. You can learn from this example and subsidize ferry operators to renew their fleet. Say they can go for low fuel consumption carbon fiber vessel, or you can encourage people to use electric vessels. The technology is mature. I believe the administration should urge and encourage ferry operators to rejuvenate their fleet so we do not have to use old ferries and be affected by the exhaust of such aged ferries. Secondly, there should be onshore electricity at piers. When people choose vessels, they will then automatically choose electric vessels or vessels with mixed fuel setup. It's just like promoting electric cars. You need to set up chargers in different areas. A few years ago, I asked you to provide onshore electricity at container ports because residents in Chunwan, Qingyi, and Kwaichong are most affected by polluted air because they live near the container port. We cannot do away with the container port because it is one of the pillars of our economy. Once container vessels berth, their engine continues to run because they have to be berthed steadily. And then the containers will be unloaded and there is soot exhausted all the time. But the administration did not pay heed. Now you are reviewing the ordinance. I hope you will be forward-looking and provide onshore electricity at our container port and piers so that our entire fleet of vessels can be rejuvenated. You really have to do more for the maritime trade to help it develop. Say, the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge has been commissioned, and many residents have used the bridge to go across the boundary. But our ferries are going to Zhuhai, Dongmen, Zhongshan, and Macau. But then they may suffer from a drop in patronage because people are using roads and bridges. However, we want to keep that choice for residents. Sometimes the bus schedule for the bridge doesn't work for them, so they prefer the steady operation of ferries. Ferries are the fallback for the bridge. The administration has a role to play here. When we take a ferry to Zhongshan, Zhuhai, or Macau, $11 of the ticket go to the administration. It's the boarding fee. It used to be very common. It's a kind of departure tax. Passengers using the road don't have to pay it, but if you take a ferry, you pay this departure tax in the form of a boarding fee. I think it is unfair. You want to develop the Greater Bay Area economy, and if you still charge this outdated fee, it is no longer appropriate. This was cancelled by Macau in 1995, but we still have it in 2018. With the commissioning of the bridge, it is quite possible that there will be a lowering of patronage for ferries. I will ask the administration to consider removing the boarding fee so the fare will come down and residents can have a more inexpensive and punctual and convenient transport service. I think the bill is not controversial, but I have been talking about the other points because ferries are a transport mode that is essential for our residents, especially when we expect an increase in population on the outlying islands. As we proposed, you should procure ferries and then people should come forward to tender for the operation. Vessels are expensive. It is not an easy decision. A vessel or ferry can cost more than $10 million, so not many companies can afford to take part, and residents have no choice. We only have 1 or 2 companies coming forward every time there is a tendering exercise, so where is the incentive for them to improve service? If you can procure the vessels and then you only get the operators in, I'm sure the quality of service will go up. Say, for example, Chengchao residents can't catch the last ferry. They hope the ferry companies will use bigger ferries so everybody can go home. Sometimes if they miss a ferry, they have to wait another hour. But things haven't improved. We've said that many times, however, ferry companies only have limited resources and they can hardly provide bigger ferries. So if the administration, the government, will buy the ferries, I'm sure you can resolve the problem. In the policy address, you say there will be the provision of water taxis. I think it's an excellent concept because it will provide more choices. You are thinking of ferry services and waterborne activities. I hope you will take a few more steps to make it convenient for residents. So I speak, Mr. Deputy.
如果冇嘅話，
Does any other member wish to speak? If not, I'll now call upon the Secretary for Transport and Housing to reply. Then the debate will come to a close. Secretary, Mr. Deputy, I'm grateful to Mr. Yik Chi-ming, Chairman of the Bills Committee, on the Ferry Services Amendment Bill 2018, members of the Bills Committee, staff of the Secretariat and the legal advisor for their efforts so that the scrutiny of the bill has been completed smoothly. Ferry service licenses are granted by the Commissioner for Transport under Section 28 of the Ferry Services Ordinance Cap 104 to allow licensees to operate ferry services. Currently, under the ordinance, the maximum period of a license, whether newly granted or extended, is of 3 years on each occasion, whereas the aggregate license period, including all extended periods, shall not exceed 10 years. Such a requirement creates an administrative burden on ferry operators. It would increase the number of renewals required during the 10-year period allowed. And this is not conducive to ferry operators' long-term planning and investment for their ferry services. In view of this, having consulted the transport panel of this council and the views of the ferry operators, we have tabled this bill proposing to extend the license period, whether newly granted or extended, from 3 years to 5 years. We consider that too long a license period would mean that the operator cannot accurately project the financial position. We would like to keep the current 10-year aggregate license period unchanged. Normally, the Commissioner for Transport would, once every 10 years, issue tenders or invite expression of interest to select the most appropriate operator for selected ferry routes so as to maintain suitable competition among the operators. Once the bill is passed, the ferry operators can consider to apply for a longer license period. As for applications submitted before the amendment ordinance comes into effect, the applicant can decide whether to keep the original license period apply for or to apply for a longer license period. We hope through the provision of the flexible arrangements, ferry operators can choose to apply for longer license periods so as to encourage them and facilitate their longer-term planning and investment, and as a result, improve the financial viability of ferry services and the upgrading of services for passengers. We would step up the communication dissemination with ferry operators. The Transport Department will take the initiative to inform the ferry operators after the bill and the amendments are passed. We note that the Bills Committee have also expressed views on other aspects of ferry service, such as the financial viability of outlying island service and the service quality, as well as the management of ferry pier facilities. And in conducting a long-term operating mode study on outlying island service, the Transport Department would meet with relevant operators and reflect views of members to the Works Department so as to enhance local ferry service quality. In respect of this bill, the amendments are technical in nature. The bill was tabled in this Council in June 2018, and the Bills Committee completed the scrutiny in July 2018. There was no amendment moved by the Bills Committee or the government. We have been offering special helping measures to 6 outlying island ferry routes. Some members have asked whether the same measures can be applied to other ferry routes. In the middle of 2019, during the midterm review, we would maintain the current operation mode. We will look into the possibility of providing subsidies so that operators can replace the existing fleet to improve service quality and also to maintain financial viability and reasonable fares. If in the future the government decides to offer special helping measures for the longer term, a longer license period would be helpful. And even if the government proposes other modes of operation during the transitional period, we still need to provide a service under the licensing system. Therefore, we have to extend the license period first. And apart from the 6 outlying island ferry routes, other licensed ferry services will also benefit from the amendments and the lengthening of the license period. At present, there are 8 other outlying island ferry routes apart from the 6 major ones. For these 8 routes, we would carry out an in-depth study, and we would look at whether extending the same measures to these 8 routes will be good value for money in expanding public funds, whether there's any alternative to these island ferry routes, and whether the routes were offered to tie in with housing developments at that time. Some members have referred to some housing projects, private housing projects. We have to take measures as appropriate. We cannot be too generalized in our approach. We are going to launch the public transport fare subsidy scheme in January 2019. We have not forgotten ferry services and Kaito services, because under the scheme, the ferry and Kaito will be covered. Actually, marine transport plays a role. We will not forget that. So for people's mobility needs and also the needs of tourism, We are now preparing for the tendering exercise to invite interested operators to operate the ferry service between Hong Kong and Central, and as well as the newly proposed water taxi service, before proceeding to the actual tendering exercise. The government also provides funding. An additional injection of $200 million have been provided to the training of personnel, as well as the provision of internship to attract young people to join the maritime trade, so that ferry service will see the injection of new blood. I hope members will understand that the administration, in respect of local ferry services and kaito services, we would never forget that they are important. We would provide the necessary facilitation measures to ensure their viability. We are concerned about the operating environment of local ferry service. Through different policies and measures, we would promote the provision of ferry service. I so submit and urge members to support the passage of the bill. And I now put a question to you, and that is the Ferry Services Amendment Bill 2018 be read the second time. With those in favor, please raise their hand. Those against, please raise their hands. I think the question is agreed by majority of the members present. I declare the motion passed. Ferry Services Amendment Bill 2018.
I now propose the Council now becomes